All right, everyone. Well, if more people come in, we will welcome them with big arms. Hi, Julia. Hi, everyone. And welcomes to our Ecosystem Day Social Gastronomy in Practice, where we will be diving into the power of food to bring about social change, which means transforming our local communities, our ecosystems, our relationships with others, and all of the goodness that food brings us as humans in this world. For those who are new to the social gastronomy movement, we are a global network of people who believe thoroughly in the power of food to bring about social transformation. We are chefs, activists, educators, farmers, social entrepreneurs who are working throughout the food value chain and with all facets of food, from seed to stomach, from compost to back to compost, who are here, and many of the beautiful faces here are also wonderful members of the social gastronomy movement. So I'm so happy to see both familiar faces and new friends. So to kick it off, I just wanted to introduce our wonderful panelists today. So Claire Effiong is the International Director at Esther's Aid in Rwanda. And we are so happy to have you here today, Claire. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Maya. My name is Claire Effiong, and I live in New York, but I'm directing the operation in Rwanda. I work with Esther's Aid, and from the first day to I arrived in Rwanda, that's where the food issue started, and so we have done whatever it is from the bushes to the street and to food. And so, and we work with the youth, with the women, and the work started as it was from that time to now. We are building up a momentum, focusing on the poor and the less privileged, and then we use food and education to bring them to the fore. Again, my name is Claire Effiong. I work in Rwanda. And Rwanda is a city in East Africa, a nation of 1,000 hills. It's a beautiful place. And we're doing all that we can to join after the aftermath of genocide, to join to raise the orphan from the dust of poverty and put them on a productive life. And if I may go a little further, with time, several years ago, I took a trip from New York to Rwanda, and I was confronted with so many things on the street, the children on the street. And so I went to what really helped me to locate the children, because I have like 75,000 children who were orphaned. And then where I located, most of them were in the bushes and garbage dump. And so we use food as a tool to get to the garbage to see them. And that's why I'm interested in food. When they talk about food, food is life. And that's what I'm so keen when we sit like all of us beautiful people talking about different things, but I know that food is life. We use food to get them from the garbage. We use food to bring them to the classroom. We use food to start the skill training and empowerment. We use food to take us up to the point of creating a culinary art school. And we use food to bring them to where we are today. That's where I could stop for now. But right now, we have gone more into the food system that as we were. And my sincere thanks goes to the SGM for making us part of this platform. And we're excited to hear what other wonderful people are going to talk to us. And during the question time, we'll have more time to, to answer and look into it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. And thank you so much for being here with us all today. And yes, we will definitely have more time to dive in deeper to food in the question rounds. And since we're a small group also, that we have questions, if you guys do have questions in the meantime for anyone that may emerge throughout these introductions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll definitely get to them as well. So next up, we have Charles Michel, who is a chef, activist, and food educator from Colombia and France, one of two worlds or many worlds, like many of us here at SGM. And he mostly works with food in all assets, or on all aspects, from multi-sensory aesthetics to experience design to cross-model perception. I just can't wait to learn more from you. So Charles, I'll let you take it over.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. It's such an honor to be here, calling in from the Andes Mountains near Bogota. This is a territory from the Muisca people, who we often don't talk much about, but they're connected to through the Andes to the ancestral Inca people, and there's many languages here from the Chibcha tradition as well, and that is part of my ancestry. And the other part of my ancestry is in France, where I was born, but I grew up most of my life here in Colombia. And yeah, I guess what I want to bring to the conversation now is how the contrast between growing up and seeing how life was lived and what things were considered, culturally okay in France, and what was cultural here in Colombia. There was such a stark contrast, where seeing kids in the streets, begging for food was something normal in Colombia. And when I went to France, it was not. And when I came back to Colombia, I was like, wait a minute, why is this normal here and not there? And I've always had a really deep connection to service, both from a lineage of cooks and women, actually, single moms. My grandmother and my great grandmother were single moms who were cooks in homes in France, and always that kind of lineage. I decided to study cooking because it was a universal language that I thought could, allow me to understand the world in a unique manner. And then, yeah, I've been exploring the art of food, the science of food, from an experimental psychologist perspective, like how what we perceive shapes our beliefs, how our beliefs shape how we behave, and how that can hopefully shift in the coming decades through food education, which is the tool, the weapon I choose, the weapon of mass instruction I choose to work with in this lifetime, which is through fun, through pleasure, educating around food. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And yeah, so grateful to be in this space and looking forward to weaving words.
Thank you, Charles, and it's so wonderful to have you here. Next up is Devon Nolan, calling us from North Minneapolis, Minnesota in the USA. Devon is a market manager at the West Broadway Farmers Market, and she does many things within the community to bring about health, real wealth, and social change. So Devon, how are you doing today?
Hi, Maya, and thank you so much, Charles. I'm so excited. I'm trying to contain all the energy. It's really hard to, maybe you can feel it through the Zoom. Maybe you can. All right, you can feel it. So yes, my name is Devon Nolan. I hail to you from North Minneapolis here in the USA. And I stand on the shoulders of giants. I come from a long line of chefs and cooks and people who fed the people. There were stories of acts of help and serving, and food was always the conduit. And so that story about how I got here, we'll talk more about that later, because I really enjoy that question because it makes me remember. I also live in a place where food has been weaponized against the people at many, many levels. And because it's been weaponized at many levels, as Maya said, I decided to get involved at many levels. And so the organization I'm most proud of working with is Appetite for Change, and we use food as a tool for health, wealth, and social change. And what I appreciate about that work is that wealth is a part of the conversation, because if you look at the history of Black people, African-American people in America, one thing we haven't been afforded the luxury of, even though we built this country, is to build an economic base for ourselves. And so that's a whole nother panel. We'll focus on food, but food is definitely a conduit for building that base. And so thinking about that common thread and what does it really mean to have health, wealth, and social change. So we'll talk more about that later. Thank you for having me.
Devon, thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, we have Hamid from Über den Tellerrand, the project coordinator for this, what translates from German into out of the box, based in Berlin, Germany. So passing over to you, Hamid.
Thank you, Maya. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. So my name is Hamid, and I've been working with Über den Tellerrand since 2017. Maybe I'll say a bit about the organization and my role in it, and that's connect us to why I'm here, is using the power of food. So as an organization, we try to bring people together on equal footing, people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, and so on. And really, we started at the time where there was a lot of migration happening in Germany, where a lot of people were arriving as refugees. And then there was quite an inspirational engagement from civil society who were engaging in all sorts of support, like psychological support, or support in the housing market, or labor market integration, or legal support, and so on and so forth. All those elements are indeed essential, but Über den Tellerrand came with the notion that another essential element is that we need to just meet on eye to eye, on an equal footing, because host community and newcomers need to be able to meet and create friendships and get to know each other. And to do that, we need to also get beyond the helper-helpee dynamic. So the enterprise started with this notion to create such spaces. And to do that, we use food as a means to bring people together, as a means that, I mean, it is a language itself and transcends the language barriers, even when people are coming anew. And it's this storage of culture and identity. And through food, I can share a lot about grandma's recipe, my identity, my history, and so on. So and it's something that gets everyone together, right? Everybody loves it, and everybody is up for a cooking evening. We're sharing and getting to know each other. So this is what we started in Berlin, and soon after that, we started replicating our model in different cities around Germany, some outside of Germany as well. And by now we are active in around 30 cities, mostly in Germany, but some outside. As a network, actually, it's quite similar to the network of social gastronomy movement. Yes, so I will keep it at that for now, and we take it to the next questions later.
Amazing. Thank you all. Thanks to all of our wonderful panelists for being here. And I also just want to take a brief moment to say, I believe that there is a bit of a technical difficulty. So if there are more people joining into the room, what I'll do is I'll just kind of take a second to reset as well. So welcome to everyone who joined, and I am sorry about that technical difficulty. It happens, I guess, it's the new norm. And it's a pleasure to have you all here. So this is Social Gastronomy in Practice, and we are the social gastronomy movement, convening around the power of food to create social change and bring about innovation. So our first question, and I'm going to start with you, Claire, is can you tell me about how you realized the power of food as a tool for transforming the lives of people and communities around you? And can you tell us a little bit more about your relationship with food as well and where that started?
Thank you so much, Maya. Of course, you know, when we talk about food, food is something that is very sensitive. Sensitive in the way that it's like, you know, it's like an intricate fabric. You know, when we see food, if, for instance, I look at it as something that is food is life. When I left, I would just want to do it that way. When I left, when we went into Rwanda to do whatever we can to help hundreds and thousands of the orphans on the street, I couldn't find any other platform or any other tool to use. So on the street, working, you know, getting children, seeing them in different, very difficult situations, and that led me into the bushes. And then that led me into the garbage dump. So when I went there, something inside of me was screaming, you know, so I had to get food. Because you cannot, because they're looking for food on the street, on the garbage dump. So when I got to the garbage dump, I saw hundreds of children, orphaned. And so what I used to get them together was food, because I got bread and some butter and something. That was something that was so intriguing to me. And then from that place, one child, you know, there were many. And then I said to them, they ate the food that they bred, and then I took one child out. So when I took that one child out, that he wanted to go to school. So, you know, education is part of what I'm talking about. From that one school child going to that school from primary, and then from that moment, with 3 months after I picked that child out from the garbage through food with others, 3 months later, I had 170 coming out from the garbage to join. And that's how we started our movement in Rwanda. And that one child got so well in education. And he went to Harvard, finished from Harvard, did his postgraduate, finished, and then he's trying to do something also to help. So what I'm saying, when it comes to food, and everything that we've been able to do from the primary school, we started from the orphan to the skilled empowerment, and all of that is around food. So food is what the tool that we have used, and we know that it works. Whether the women empowerment and whether those ones that are so depressed, we use that to bring them together. And if I would say a little, you know, there's nothing that food cannot do. When people sit together, it's about food and they're happy. And any family that there is no food, there is crisis. And poverty, I would say, I would call it as it is, it's sin. And when people are hungry, there is crime, there's a lot of situation, as it were. But that, we use that to bring the children together, bring the women together. From there, we started something it's so unbelievable now that we are building. From there, we were building a culinary art school. The reason we started the culinary art school is still about food, because we come to a place where we have to have a nutritional, something with nutrition to bring the people and to educate them on what they should do and what they should do about food. You know, it has been, okay. Thank you, I hope I have seen the sign. You know, so what I'm saying briefly is that food is a tool that brings people together. It's a tool that gives life. It's a life that transforms life. And it has done that, and we have seen that. And then we still have to do more to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I could stay here longer listening to your stories, Clara. This is so inspiring. Thank you for sharing. hard to continue on that, as I would love to hear more from you. I guess on my end, I started, very early kind of studying cooking, but then very quickly I got to the rabbit hole of restaurants, and I realized that the power of food was not truly, what I thought it was in the restaurant world. I felt that the more I learned about the technique of cooking, the more I realized that we were disconnected from the true power of food, which is an act of nourishment. It's an act of generosity. And I had the chance, to study in a culinary school that opened the doors to many different kind of fine dining restaurants. And but I felt that there was something more to the power of food, that the emotion that goes into food, what Claire was sharing around, everything is possible around food when we sit around a table. And that is something that, unfortunately, within the forces of the market, is very hard to be seen. Why? Because there is no democratic access to food nowadays. Good food and healthy food remains a privilege for most people on the planet. And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way if we look at the real kind of ethical basis that we're missing, I feel, nowadays, when it comes to understanding our place on Earth. And when it comes for us to actually show up to diminish suffering in this world. And so I guess, I got into the path of working with food as a tool for change, because I realized that the food system was crippled with injustice. I learned, and I started, and I acknowledge this, that I started from a place of privilege, being able to work in fine dining restaurants, to work with some of the most expensive ingredients in the world, when there's people who, as Claire was saying, like, this is the reality of our world. Like, and it's not like I have a lot of friends who work in restaurants, but and they're amazing, and I support the work, right? They do, in terms of refining a certain cultural heritage and being able to show it to others and to have a good life, hopefully, working in these restaurants. But what's at stake nowadays with food is much more than that. It's human dignity, it's equilibrium with the world around us and the world we consume, nature we consume through the act of eating. And there's so much work to do. So yeah, I'll just end on that for now. And yeah, super privileged. I feel privileged to be here with Claire, with Devon, with all of you to talk about these topics, and hopefully we can go deeper and deeper into these questions.
Absolutely. Hi, Devon. Nice.
Hey. Excuse me. I'm just sitting here listening. Oh my goodness, I'm so enthralled in these wonderful stories, and I'm so honored to be on this panel with you all. We are for answering the first question, right, Maya? So I think about the social context is important in this conversation because we are in different parts of the world. And I'm very aware that I'm in a bit of a bubble here. So I want to take a moment, just take a moment of silence, if that's okay, for because food is sacred. And as you heard me say earlier, food has been weaponized against my people here. But I think about what led me to the point, and I realized my power to create food as a means for social change. We always grew food. We had food growing in our backyard. My grandmother grew food. My grandparents grew food. It was just always there. And I didn't realize until I got outside of those four walls that not everybody was having that same experience. And I realized that during that time that we grew the food and put our hands in the soil, that it was the great connector, right? That was our connection back to creation and getting our hands dirty. But oftentimes, because of the social context and the history of chattel slavery in the United States, folks don't want to get their hands back in the soil, right? That's the myth that oftentimes people believe. But we found that through our work, that the youth are the truth is the mantra you'll hear oftentimes with Have for Change. The youth really, they have all the solutions, but they have no political power. And so the story that comes to mind is I live in a community where, like, oftentimes I say we are the social leper of the city and the state. Oftentimes Black folks just being Black becomes a problem. And if they don't conform to the dominant culture's social norms, it's a problem. So I worked in supportive housing for a long time and helping getting families out of homelessness and into stable housing. And there was a group of young Black boys who they were being mischievous, so-called, in the neighborhood. And long story short, I got called in and they're like, what do we do with them? And I'm like, we'll figure this out. I'm on the job. I sat on the steps with popsicles and all the children showed up. Now that wasn't the healthiest choice, but it was a means to get their attention, right? And we talked about their social responsibility and what it means to be in community. And they talked about not having a healthy social outlet. And so we planted a garden in the courtyard in between the two apartments. And now this is my first time like growing without the assistance of my elders and whatnot. And so I didn't know that squash grew under those big, huge leaves. And so I ended up with huge squash that weren't edible, but we learned a lot. The community grew. The elders came and watered and prayed over that space. And you saw the social context shift. The very young people who they thought were the problem became a part of the solution. And the problem was that the adults were failing them and they were not being served and they were invisible and they weren't being seen. And the wonderful thing about that particular story and why it was catalytic for me is because those young people are now adults. I've been doing this for 25 years and they now have children and families. And when I see them in community, I know that something happened, something big happened, even though it was on a small scale. And so that's something to be mindful of. Sometimes we think we have to have this big sweeping change. And sometimes we just have to start. We have to start small and we have to do something. We have to build a base and really, really be clear about where we're headed. And so realizing that the power of food as to create social change it's always been there, I think, but sometimes it is overshadowed and someone else is writing the narrative about our lives and what's important. And so when we are really intentional about reclaiming what we know and what is really just intricately in us, honestly, right? And I've heard that with my counterparts, even though we're in other parts of the world, those solutions surfaced when we needed them to. And oftentimes food was the conduit for health, wealth, and social change. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Devon. And health, wealth, and social change. I think I love that. Hamid, over to you, and then we'll move to our next question.
Thank you, Maya. Yeah, I think I stumbled upon food actually. So my background was mostly working in the topic of migration and the topic of refuge. I come from Jordan, one of the biggest host countries of migrants and refugees around the world. And before I came to Berlin to study, I was working with the Red Cross in several projects for a couple of years. And then I came to Berlin to study development and economics with a focus on understanding, what are means of change around the world and how can we develop or progress as a society. This led me after to go to Ubud Telegram or to a form of interest in grassroots local organization as a means of change. Maybe we can talk about that a bit later. And what led me to the organization was first the issue of social cohesion and social inclusion of migrants and newcomers. And then it was proposed like, this organization uses food as a tool to bring people together. And I was like, yeah, that sounds quite interesting. Why not? But it was only when I started working and see people's passion and that I started to understand what a tool food is, its capacity, its potential, and to really understand that it is really the first element of integrating or getting to know a new place. We all know that when we visit a new country, even as tourists, right? The first thing we do is to eat the local cuisine, and this is where we start getting a certain sense of familiarity, understanding about the place's history, identity, its taste. Really, we get a hint of what this place is. So, and then on another level, as a person who migrates to a new country, it's also the way you communicate to this new locality, not only the way that you get to know it. This is what can be termed as cultural or culinary diplomacy. And it's the way that you start engaging in this new space and showing that you cook your own cuisine and say, okay, this is who I am. This is, if you want to get to know me. And these are actually the elements that Ubed Interrand as an organization starts playing with. And then I would mention yet another thing that was really showing me within that. I'm focusing on food's potential within migration now. And it's this notion of culinary memory. And in a place where, as a diaspora, how do you maintain your social identity? How do you maintain your emotional ties back to home, especially if home is a place that you cannot go to? And it's food with its taste, its smell, the ritual around it of how we get together and how we eat it and so on. So it's really, really profound and important on the psychological, emotional level when we're talking about the issue of migration. And I will end it with the last element that is also really importantly connected, which is finding work. As newcomers, you arrive somewhere new as a diaspora, and really using your own cuisine and opening restaurants and getting into the labor market by opening a restaurant is one of the main, if not the main, ways for diaspora communities to earn a means of living, which through also connect and communicate with host communities and then integrate with it. It's really interesting at the end then how any local cuisine coming from somewhere else will also develop in a certain way to merge with its new environment, also showing the fusion of cultures. So these are the elements after I stumbled upon food that really showed me how rich it is. And this is what we at our work we try to grapple with and to utilize as what we term the power of food. Yes.
Thank you, Hamid. And thank you all. It's so interesting to see how your origin stories really with food and with working with food and how it shows up differently in different local contexts around the world as well. Next question I have for all four of you is, what is something that has caused you to pause? Whether it be a challenge or a pleasant surprise or a learning since you've begun working in various organizations and with food in different facets in terms of bringing people together and ensuring that people have what they need to survive and to thrive. So I'll throw it back to you, Claire.
Thank you so much, Maya. What caused me to pause?
Yes.
Well, I would go straight to the point to saying that, first of all, money, resources to move what we do from one level to the other and to impact more lives has been a source of something that was some challenges, and that has caused me not to pause. But the commitment to see life change, the commitment to build people, to bring people from nothing to where they should be as human beings has made me not pause. So, Anna, we say to ourselves that we are unstoppable, that nothing will make us to stop, to pause. Yes, Corona came in to have us to pause, but we tried to do something different. In the midst of all of that, there was no food. Then we realized that we can use potatoes, orange sweet potatoes, that is more nutritious. So with our culinary kitchen, what we did, we said, okay, we must have light, we must have water, we must have something to keep the young people or the organization or the school going at their kitchen. And we decided to do something creative and then use that to create more things that we can do. So what I'm saying, we use what we have to make something happen through food. And we use that to create cookies, to create bread, and then we're able to open up a pastry shop. And in the midst of all of that, we are able to create something and use that and sell and stay on board. until something happened till now. And then there is nothing that would make me, we try not to, yes, we pause because of the situation in the global situation, but the driven force that will make you in the face of human beings and human suffering and in human, is the compassion, the love that you have, the heart to make sure that if you pause, the world, they don't see these ones. Like I'm talking about like in Rwanda where we are, or East Africa where we are operating also. The world don't see them, but we see them. And when you see a situation, you don't step in to help the poor, to help the needy, to bring them out of where they are to where it is a bit comfortable. When you have no resource to really help and you cry to the world and they don't answer, you have nothing else to do but to look back, to look forward, to be creative. And then that's what we have done. That has helped us not to pause, because if we pause, everything will be forgotten. So we refuse to be forgotten. And then again, I cannot thank this platform enough for having us to come and share, what Devon have shared, what Amid have shared, and what Charles have shared. I mean, it's all coming to one thing. There you see them, they're like a driven force. Nothing will stop us, guys. Nothing can stop us. So we have to continue to do that. Diversify into education and make sure that we do what we have to do and contribute to the world and to the planet. That's all I can say.
Beautiful, Claire.
Thank you, Claire. Wow, that is deeply inspiring. I am going to kind of just like Devon wanted to take a moment of silence and, just understanding, sometimes so painful to understand how much power we have and sometimes how much we believe we don't have it. There's so many things that have caused me to pause, and I almost didn't know where to start, and I'm going to start somewhere. And there's so many places where I've had to pause, and and I'm saying this being a white man who, just that already has a lot of life has made it easier on me, on my soul, let's say, because of having this body, right? And so just acknowledging that also, and so many things to pause. The first thing that really struck me was hearing a professor of plant science, one of the most prominent scientists in the world when it comes to biotechnology, saying how we were running to the precipice, that a third of the global carbon emissions were caused by our current broken system, that we were producing enough food to feed 20 billion people, but most of that we were feeding to animals. So we would eat, animals instead of grains. That was the first moment where I just clicked of like, what am I doing with my being a chef and doing this research? All this is nice, but there has to be something else. There has to be something more. And from that moment, 2013, that's where the seed of the activist, the seed of calling things out, and through packaging them nicely, because that's how we work. Humans are driven by pleasure. We are driven by storytelling. We are driven by the things that entice us. And so I've always kept on working, trying to package things nicely, but as Trojan horses to deliver powerful truths once the thing is in you. And I feel like food is a very potent, powerful, very potent Trojan horse in a way. And this is how I've been kind of seeing it in my work. Make it nice on the outside and then put a powerful message in. As a culinary artist, which is something that I've done, as a speaker, as someone who has a voice, and so I've really tried my best at doing that. But the amounts I've had to pause to just say like, hey, we're actually worse than I thought. And the more I learn, the more I realize how bad it is. Devon was mentioning how food has been weaponized. This is like centuries of food being weaponized, and still today. When are we going to stop? Right? In this continent, in Latin America, we have, in the whole of America, the Ayala, Turtle Island, there has been so many kind of ways in which peoples have been, culturally silenced, to not say, cultural genocides and actual genocides also, with using food as a weapon, right? The Aztecs were forbidden to cultivate amaranth, which is an incredible source of protein and macronutrients, forbidden by the Spanish for 400 years. Still today, amaranth is not on the plate of most people. And it is an incredibly sustainable food source, an incredibly abundant food source. So I hear there's so much abundance on this planet. And yet we are operating within scarcity mindsets. And those who have more resources often and power, I feel they're moving so slow. And so that's why I believe a lot in the power of civil society. I believe a lot in the power of what's happening here. And especially the people who are here, Hamid and Claire and Devon, like, that are sharing their story of how much they're able to do and how much power there is there. How do we lift up that power? How do we empower that power? How do we believe into the power that we have as citizens to change things and really leverage the power of food? Yeah, I'm gonna end there for now. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Charles. Devon, so what are some things that have caused you to pause, whether they be challenges or learnings in your journey?
Thank you, Claire and Charles. I'm again caught listening to these wonderful stories. There's so many common threads. So I tried to pull out one thing, because there were many. I realized that I grew up protected. I was sheltered from a lot. I grew up in a very close-knit family and large family. And so that was my ecosystem. That was my nucleus. That's where I dwelled. And when I went out into the world, right, beyond those four walls, is when I found out that societal racism, structural and institutional racism were impacting my life in ways that I didn't know, because I was young and I was free and I didn't know, right? So realizing that at that point in my professional journey, it gave me pause. It's just that all of the systems here in the United States were built on a system of chattel slavery, in which my ancestors were kidnapped, brutally raped and murdered for hundreds of years, from 1619 supposedly until 1865. And that wasn't that long ago. There's still, these same systems are still in place. And so recognizing that kind of as a catalytic moment, that of course the grassroots work is important. Of course we need to continue to work with the people and, as I said earlier, get my hands in the dirt. But that there were political powers at play that needed to hear from me. They were making decisions about my life without my input. The other kind of catalytic moment was just, as Claire said, just around resources, that there is this myth of scarcity. It's a total myth. This country is supposedly a superpower, right? Air quotes. And yet you have your citizens here suffering in ways that are just unnecessary, right? And so these things are by design. And just getting to that moment of accepting that oppression is by design. And these systems were by design, and they were not designed to serve my people at all. And I wanted to think and believe differently. I wanted to believe in humanity, and that why would they want to do that to my people, right? And so it was very painful getting to that point, recognizing I was grateful to have elders around me and their wisdom, and the wisdom of my ancestors. And but there are patterns in our society that if we pay close attention and look at the history and spend time with our elders, and really paying attention to who's writing the narrative, we'll find those patterns. And it really allows us the opportunity to be strategic. And that's what I heard, even in our counterparts, that we have to be strategic. We can't always be in this type of reactionary mode. Charles referred to it as the Trojan horse. I like that. I like that analogy. I often refer to it as kind of this inside outside game, right? You have to, in order to know what your enemy's doing, you have to sit at the table with them sometimes. You can't always be reacting to the attack. Sometimes you have to be preemptive. And so I know this sounds like wartime talk and wartime thinking, but that's what it feels like to be in America and be Black. You always have to be preparing and thinking. And I'm recognizing right now that my trauma is very present, even in just talking about this. Thinking about my ancestors having to smuggle seeds in their braids so they'd have seeds to plant wherever they ended up. And the okra seed and how it sustained my people. There's so many stories, so many things that along my professional journey that caused me to pause, but also caused me to be strategic and go harder and realize that, again, I stand on the shoulders of giants. Folks have already paved the way in a way that my fight looks different than theirs, right? I'm not being whipped with a whip physically. It's more of a psychological whip, right? And that you have, if you were to Google, again, my city, North Minneapolis, you will likely see what is the current day version of chattel slavery, in that the very institutions and people that were charged to protect us are slaughtering us. And that's our system of policing. So the social context is always important. I want to bring that because I recognize that I'm not in Rio, I'm not in Rwanda, I'm not in Brazil, I'm not in Colombia. I'm here, but what I'm hearing over and over is that there is a common thread through all of it. And even though it's painful, and even though I have to bring forward these stories, it also fortifies my resolution because I just become more resolute in the fact that this has to happen. It has to change. It may not change in my lifetime. It may be 7 generations from now, but I'm here because someone planned for me to be here. Thank you. Hotep.
Thank you so much, Devon. Thank you for sharing. And I'm so moved by your words and just everything. Hamid, over to you.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Devon, so much for saying it like it is, really. Yeah, challenges along the way that I saw. As I said, I come from a background of development. I used to work for big umbrella development organizations before, and from there went to study development studies, which is like really trying to understand how to, implement millennium or sustainable development goals, implement policies that are meant to make the world a better place. And such a journey is just full of disappointments. I mean, first of all, development for me was all in all as a notion, a disappointment. And in a certain way, one starts understanding how the world economic system functions and how we still live in colonial structures, whether internally, as Devon mentioned, or whether on a world level, taking it from there. And then I moved to study to Germany, and I come from a totalitarian structure, where the country where I come from. And then there was a disappointment of parliamentary democracy, really. And even to understand that democracy is not a structure where people are meant to create their own destiny. Again, Devon, you can be a really good witness of that. And then to understand eventually that you have to go to the local level, you have to go to the grassroots where people organize themselves to fulfill their own needs, to create and change their own destiny under great odds, against power structures that are meant and designed to do exactly the opposite. And as a disappointment, and I would follow Devon's footstep in mentioning, I mean, I come from Europe, the heart of colonialism. Racial supremacy is still at the core of current world-day politics, locally and globally. Even you can see it in really positive elements, and then you see a certain element of hypocrisy. Now we are at a wartime in Europe, and you can see quite an inspiring, welcoming culture to migrants, newcomers, and refugees who are coming from Ukraine. But one cannot also turn away from how different it is from refugees and newcomers that are coming from the global south, from Syria, from North Africa, and so on. And to understand that still until now, the value of human life is different. And I'm talking about mainstream culture, progressive culture, left culture, and so on and so forth. We can see this in vaccine politics. I mean, each crisis that comes will always reflect more and more that we have different values of human life. And this is the main challenge to transcend. So it is, in a certain way, a cultural, spiritual transformation that we need to undergo first before we can implement genuine, practical policies that are meant to counter climate change, pandemics, and all sorts of challenges that we are facing nowadays. Yeah, so yeah, we went on a negative note here, but I think we will go on an optimistic one or a hopeful one at a later point on this conversation. Maya, back to you.
Yeah, I don't know if I would, I mean, I think we are on a real note right now, and that's something I appreciate so deeply and authentically about this panel and all of you who have shown up with authenticity today and have spoken your truth. So before we go into a question and answer session, and also if we have time, we'll go into short breakout rooms. I want to end on a note that is almost an imagination exercise. If anyone's listened to the Food Solidarity podcast or been around me much, you'll know that this is one of my favorite questions. And that question is, imagine that we live, and I used to say 2030, but that seems very soon from now, but let's say 2030, and we have managed to achieve the world that we all desire, where everyone is treated fairly, with love and with care, where everyone has access to the food that they need to survive, to thrive, and have children who grow up big and strong and loved. What does that future look like for you in your local community? And what role did you play in getting us there? Because we all play a role, whether we work in this space or not, in co-creating the future that we want for the world. So with that question, Claire, I send it to you. And you're muted, if anything.
Thanks, Maya. That's an interesting, this question is, each time I listen to or think about this kind of question or what we are facing, sometimes it's hard to grapple with because of what we see on the ground. The UN Sustainable Development Goal 2 aims to achieve zero hunger. They said it is one of the sustained development goals to establish by the United Nations. So that is to say to end hunger by 2030, achieve food security, improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Maya, that question, each time I look at it and I see the reality on the ground, I pause to begin to think, how is this going to be? because we can talk, we can do all things. I'm talking about here where I am, because the rate the malnutrition among children is big. Some time ago, excuse me if I may say that, they came up with something, based on the SDG, the sustainable goal by 2030. They started working on it. And then they said, well, how can we give a pot of nutritious porridge to a child in a household that will bring that child, that will make that maybe that porridge is made from orange sweet potatoes, that will give that child at least to reduce malnutrition. And a lot of things are being done. Who will do this? How will we do it? How do we reach out to it? I thank the SGM again and again for making this what it is, because even when I take the map of Africa and really look at it, what you see there on the map, when it comes to where they're doing many, many, many things, that is 2 dots or 3 dots. But the rest of the world, they have many dots of where they're operating and doing things to bring things up. So when will we get to that? How do we get to this? It's a question, Maya, that it makes you to pause and think. And really, sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes I get emotional when you get into the villages and then there's so much noise about all of these things. I'm not being political. I'm not being what? I'm just being real, because I am with the real people on the ground. And then sometimes you see, we want to do this thing and we get into the community. When we get into the community, we want to give them what they want, the people who bring that thing to give to them, to the community. And when they give, that might not be what the community wants. And then they give it. And before you know, that thing falls apart. And then you see that we are struggling with not really the implementation, we are struggling with what can we move from this level to that level? How do we achieve this goal? How can we achieve food security? How can we achieve improved nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture? How can we do that? So with what we are doing with Charles, with with Ahmed, we are just a voice trying to speak for the voiceless. We are just a voice trying to see what to bring together to see if more change could be effected. We are just a little voice. If we chip in here and there, things will come to, who knows, like Devon said, it might not be in her lifetime. But I want to guarantee you, you don't stop speaking, you don't stop doing. With the little that we have, all of us as a team, Charles, we are all coming together to make sure that I don't know how, but I tell you, till now, we've not been able to, hopefully by 2030, maybe in the next 15 years, something will happen. With this movement that we have, and with us putting our effort, maybe something will happen.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Inside, I'm doing a standing ovation for what you just said. I feel you with this, and so the question, Maya, you ask is lovely, and I'll get to it in a second. I also connect with Hamid of like we've been to the complexities, and I feel like there's a lot under the hood that wants to be said, and it's good to acknowledge now what's next, right? I do feel like we are obsessed as humans with short-termism because of our biology. Our biology needs quick rewards, and we fight for it, and this is how we've been doing for millions of years. Now, we need to get better at it. Human evolution is happening as we speak, with the encounter with technology, with the internet, with the Anthropocene, the age of humans starting in this very moment, like our lifetimes, these generations. I am totally in with Devon's philosophy of the 7 generations, which is what the elders tell us, right? We will need to, it takes 7 generations to heal the trauma that's been created nowadays in Europe, right? So that's what we're up against. Now, what are the most potent seeds that we can agree on weaving their DNAs and weaving the stories of these seeds in ways that can plant powerful change? And I think we're, doing the best we can is already good enough, and treating ourselves kindly, first with our bodies and ourselves, and then with the world around us, because that's the only way we can truly show up. I feel like the Sustainable Development Goals are a great endeavor. I really believe that the United Nations is our best attempt at developing some kind of collective global, power and force of good. I really believe in that. But I also feel that, the zero hunger, SDG, we're fighting for it. But I think before getting there, we need the Sustainable Development Goal 18, zero greed. And that's something very hard to get to. And I do feel that if we don't get that one solved, greed, which is also something that we carry in our DNA, in our past, there's scarcity, like not having enough and having to fight with others, with the other, right? To make sure that our kin, our family gets enough, right? But when we have enough, now we want more, just to make sure in case, something happens. That is the root of greed. That is something that we must be at peace with in the past. But now with the power that we have as humans, connecting through the waves at the speed of light, literally, that's happening now, right here, right? It's a miracle that we're able to communicate in this way and to feel this connection and this, in a way, like this frequency of connection across the waves, across the air. That is incredibly powerful. Now we need to adapt our mindsets. I really connect with you, Hamid, and what you shared around this cultural and spiritual shift that needs to happen first in order to have like psychosocial change, right? In the way that how the human brain and body interact with our social surroundings. We need to have that, right? Where's the funding for that, right? The funding there is like just love and care. And this is what we're doing when we cook, when we gather people around the table, when we gather people around the virtual table as well, to try and figure out different things. Now, all that said, Maya, your question, what do I see in the future? I imagine a world where every single human being gets basic food education as a human right. Because knowing how simple and how beautiful the miracle of life is, of putting a seed in the soil and seeing it grow, and that seed turning into 100 seeds, right? Or 50 or 1,000 seeds. That miracle should be mandatory for every single human being on earth. Because when you learn that, that's the most powerful revolutionary tool. And it's a soft revolution. It's not a violent revolution. It's very soft, and it grows with the season and grows with the waters. It will get us to change our understanding of our role in the great kind of life systems. And another dream I have is that if we were to educate everybody, and I feel that there's a huge thing, I'm writing this in my book right now, like the food illiteracy bias, the fact that people don't have basic food literacy, especially everyone in society, right? But in positions of power, we don't have that basic knowledge around food. We don't understand its power, and hence we're leaving that solution as almost an afterthought. And I feel that if we get the food education in 50 years and a few generations, we will be able to get to a point where instead of universal basic income, we would have universal basic nutrition. Every single human being funded by everybody's taxes in public kitchens, in public gardens, using abandoned urban spaces. This is already happening, but it's so small and like maybe not as well interconnected. We know the solutions, like grow your food, learn about food, share a plate, and eventually, having one meal a day covered by the government that covers your basic needs in nutrition of like macronutrients. That is true empowerment, I feel, much more than giving people a salary for free. And so anyways, that's a couple of dreams: food education for all and universal basic nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you. Want me to go my turn? Thank you, Charles. So inspiring you all are, Claire. I can't wait to hear from No, I'm like, I keep having to go after Charles. And it's like, I love it though. It's been amazing. So to your question about imagining 2030, that is not that far away. And we actually have plans set for 2040 here in the city of Minneapolis. But I think a lot about plans. There are lots of plans at every level. I want to take a step back because I don't know if we've even acknowledged this at all, but we are still in a global pandemic. And so my 2030 looks different now. What does it look like to be on the other side? This is my first pandemic. I've never done this before. And I don't say that jokingly, but it has been life-changing. So when I think about 2030, I think about reclamation for my people. That is always the goal, and liberation. Not justice, but liberation. I think justice is a goal that requires our oppressor to relinquish the level of power that they never will. But to be liberated and to foster systems that promote self-reliance will get us to reclamation. And so for me, that is about pivoting the conversation from kind of this, of course, social service and social needs, which will always be there, and we should always do charity and take care of our people. The US doesn't do a very good job of that. I don't know what other places are like. I have been here my entire life. I've visited other places, but I've never lived there. And that's a different experience, right? I've been to Barcelona. I've been there, but I don't live there. And so pivoting that conversation from kind of the social service to what does it look like to build an economic base for my people? And that question for me in running a public market, right? So creating these low entry access points for entrepreneurs and farmers, because farmers are entrepreneurs. So I have to call out the farmers and entrepreneurs because we oftentimes don't make that connection. This is people's livelihood. And so that begged the question of how do we leverage public markets as economic drivers? And so I had the wonderful opportunity, I think it was 2015, to go to Barcelona to the International Public Markets Conference and learned a lot about what was happening again in the world, right? How are we fostering solutions that are impacting this global issue? We have examples now that we have trying to get to the other side of this global pandemic. What if we had that same type of responsiveness to this issue of world hunger? What if the systems that were surfaced in response to this need, which we knew was always there because we do this work, but it became more visible, right? It became more visible. And so then resources came. And so what does it look like to pivot and not always be in reactionary mode, but to have these preemptive strikes? And feeding your people should be basics, right? Food is a basic human right. So what drives that for me, and to your question, Maya, is two things, a couple of things. Shaping policy has at every level, being at the table when the decisions are made, oftentimes building our own table if need be. But in Minnesota, given the social context where people of color are 14% of the population, and that's not just Black people, it's all people of color. That sitting at the table oftentimes means that you are the only person of color and oftentimes the only ADOS person. And ADOS means American descendant of slavery. That social context, that worldview is not welcomed. They don't understand it. They think chattel slavery is over. You should be over it. Get over it, move on. But how do you move on? And what does that look like? So as Claire said, giving the voices to the voiceless is a big part of that. And the other part of that is really being able to have the data to support it. It's that inside outside game again. I can't just come in there and tell you all my heart tugging stories about what oppression has done to me, because that's not how our systems work. They work based on data. So if I can tell you that public markets in the city of Minneapolis can raise $13 million in 1 year, that's a very different conversation rather than, please help us feed ourselves, right? It's still meeting the need. But for me, it's about strategy, and we need it all. We need all the strategies. We need both and to really start to shift these systems. Many of them need to be completely dismantled, right? I think oftentimes we're in agreement around that. But I'm also, because I'm a strategist and a futurist, we have to be thinking about what do we do after. We can't just dismantle it. And then what do we do with the people? How do we feed the people? Who has a plan for that? And you can see my shirt, the Black Panther Party. Google them, check them out. There's a lot of history there around food as a revolutionary act. And it shouldn't be that way because we have plenty. That myth of scarcity is what drives this. But we have to ask ourselves, who's writing the narrative? So part of that reclamation for my people is telling our own story and not looking for the oppressor to somehow decide to stop oppressing us one day, because that's not a realistic goal. Hotep.
Thank you, Devon. I have my eye on the time, so I will also keep my answer to 3 to 4 minutes. Thank you a lot, Devon. That was like really inspiring, and it's more difficult to be after you than you. Until 2030, I mean, that's 8 years. And the first thought I had is like, my God, that's a lifetime. And where we go from here is the result of the collection of our choices and our actions. And I do agree with you, Charles, about this obsession that we have with shortism usually. And yet those 8 years are existentially deterministic in human civilization and destiny. And what we do here actually will shape our future to see if this human civilization or human organization will be possible. I maintain that there's a lot of hope, and I see hope starting from the localities and grassroots organization to thinking about grassroots organization being collective and being politicized, because what we need to change our systems and structures, and these are political questions, and therefore demand political answers and political organization. And where I see now that after 30, 40 years of neoliberalism, where there is no worker movement anymore and no real genuine trade union organization and so on and so forth, but we have this incredibly passionate, engaged civil society on local levels all around the world. And I think the fundamental challenge we stand upon is if this civil society can acquire and develop political consciousness and understand that we have a role beyond the role of each organization, but a role of advocacy, organization, a role on the street, and a role of changing policy. And if that happens, then there's a lot of hope. Within the current challenges we faced in the last few years, it doesn't look good how we reacted and responded to pandemics and our understanding of climate change and so forth. We are going through the direction of nationalism, border regimes, and fear. And yet there is hope that I see in the Sunrise Movement, Extinction Rebellion, Fridays for Future. There's a lot of passion, a lot of organization happening out there. So I will maintain what Gramsci said, I think, to maintain pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. And I think I will end it at that. Maya, back to you.
I think I need to get that tattooed because that is one of the best things I've heard, that quote. Thank you all so much. And I know I am aware that we have 10 minutes left, but I think it's really important that we take a moment to go into smaller groups for a quick connection. And there will just be one guiding question. If you are participating in the audience and you are just listening in, that's okay too. Just let us know. And if you stay back in the main room, but for everyone else, we're going to go into just small, quick breakout rooms of 3 to 4 people. And the guiding question for discussion is just what struck you from what you heard from these incredible panelists just now. I know myself, I probably will need an hour after this to write and reflect from everything I heard today. I'm inspired and I'm pensive. So anything that struck you about the conversation, and in a moment you'll be moved into breakout rooms. No? There's a fly in here and it's driving me crazy. I will pause the recording too much. I could put music. Nah, I can't. Close now.
I'm gonna remove pins now, okay?
Yeah, I thought they were. I think they're just pinned for you. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Well, I hope everyone didn't get cut off mid-sentence. So we know that happens in breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. Well, we know that breakout rooms are never long enough, and those were quite short. But I do hope that you got to connect a little bit. So before we do our closing, I just want to allow the space for anyone who's interested to open up, just open your mic or raise your Zoom hand or physical hand and talk about something that struck you, or maybe from the full conversation or just from your breakout room. So if you feel moved to do so, please just unmute yourself.
Did you mention our names? No.
Edie?
Yeah, no, we were just saying we were with Devon, and she spoke about the energy at the beginning, and both of our puppies felt it and they fell asleep. They were so peaceful. And anyway, this is Momo.
So if your puppy approved.
Yes, the dogs approve.
My puppy's way too big for me to try to bring him on the screen. He's a terrier, blue pit bull terrier. So his name is Indigo. He's huge. So if I don't want to wake him up. But thank you, Vivi.
I love to hear it. Anyone else?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I'm so inspired. I was talking to Hamid and I told him that I got the sense of a lot of open hearts, and at the same time, so what inspired me the most is how empowered you are to take action. And that was, I was telling him, sometimes you think the problem is so big and you don't know where to start, but all of you have started for like just a small thing and seeing how everything has grown for you, and it inspires me to do the same. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Beautiful, Vanessa. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, so if everyone could do me a quick favor, I just, if you could type one word in the chat, if you could describe how you're feeling leaving today's session in one word, which I know is hard. Just type it into the chat, and at the very end, just hit enter before you leave, just so we can close that way. But to close out our session today, I just truly, from the bottom of my heart, I think this was one of my favorite panels ever, because of a balance between reality, experience, care, hope, and history, which I think sometimes in these spaces we don't go into deep enough. And the fact that each and every one of you took the time to do that speaks just mountains. It moves mountains, speaks very loudly. And I'm so grateful that all four of you decided to be here, and that everyone here in the audience was so participative and listened so actively. And we are very grateful for you. If you're interested in learning more about the social gastronomy movement, or, social gastronomy in practice, please visit www.socialgastronomy.org and check out our work. But in the meantime, we hope to have many more spaces like this. So do keep an eye out. And for all of you that were here today, may you have a wonderful, healthy, and abundant weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, in one word. Okay, nice. I love it. You guys are so great.